Usually when we talk about encountering a language barrier, there's this implicit expectation of geography.
Right, like you're traveling.
Exactly. You picture yourself stepping off a train in a completely foreign city. You're navigating some bustling market, and you realize you don't know the local word for milk to put in your coffee.
Yeah, the friction is expected there.
Right. It's just part of the travel
Yeah.
experience. But I want you to picture a completely different scenario today, one that happens entirely within your own comfort zone.
Oh, the worst kind.
Truly the worst. So you're sitting at your desk, maybe in your home office, you're in the zone, working hard, pushing up against a critical deadline, and suddenly, with absolutely no warning, your computer screen completely stops.
Ah, yes. The universal
You
nightmare.
click the mouse, nothing happens. You rapidly tap the space bar. Just dead silence.
It's a universally terrifying moment, honestly. Your heart rate actually spikes.
It really does.
Yeah.
And in that specific moment, you know exactly what is happening in your native language. I mean, you possess the exact cultural and technical vocabulary to articulate this disaster.
You could write a vivid, highly descriptive essay about your frustration in your mother tongue.
A novel, even. But, the moment you realize you have to pick up the phone and explain this failure to an English-speaking IT department or, message your international team on Slack, your mind just goes completely, utterly blank.
Which is a fascinating cognitive phenomenon in itself, really, because the panic doesn't come from a lack of general intelligence. It comes from the fact that technological vocabulary often feels incredibly binary to language learners.
Binary how? Like on or off?
Exactly. You feel like you either possess the exact hyper-specific diagnostic term for that hardware failure, or you're just left flailing, making awkward, desperate hand gestures at a blank screen that, no one on the other end of the phone can even see.
Yeah, it's that huge gap between knowing the reality in your head and having the immediate, accessible linguistic tool to project it out into the world.
Right.
Like when a coffee cup drops and shatters, you know it's broken. Broken or not broken, it's a clean binary. But when you step into the world of everyday technology, suddenly that linguistic landscape becomes incredibly murky.
Muddy waters.
Yeah, because the machine sitting on your desk isn't exactly dead. I mean, the lights might still be on, the fan might still be whirring, but it is definitely not alive and functioning either.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And navigating those muddy waters is exactly our mission for this deep dive today.
Yes, it is.
We're exploring a collection of real, everyday office dialogues and tech support transcripts that we've gathered, and we're focusing purely on the natural spoken English that you actually need to survive these mundane, but frankly high-stress technology failures.
Which is so needed. The goal here is to bridge that massive gap between knowing what is wrong internally and confidently, smoothly explaining it out loud to someone else.
Absolutely.
And I want to set a very clear expectation with you, the listener, right from the start here. This is not going to be some sterile academic grammar lecture.
No, please no.
We are not going to sit here and conjugate verbs or diagram sentences for the next hour. The problem with textbook English in a moment of panic is that it makes you sound like a robotic instruction manual.
You don't want to sound like an android.
No. Instead, we're going completely practical. You're going to learn how to replace those rigid academic sentences with real, fluid, spoken chunks of English.
We're going to deconstruct how native speakers describe tech problems naturally. We'll look at the psychological nuances of asking for help without sounding like a demanding tyrant.
Which is very easy to do by accident.
So easy. And we'll look at the narrative structure of understanding a technical diagnosis, plus the cognitive science behind making these phrases actually stick in your brain.
And definitely stick around until the end, because we're also setting you up with a comprehensive 7-day speaking challenge. It's designed to literally rewire how you process these situations.
Because we know how incredibly isolating it feels when your spoken English doesn't accurately reflect your actual intelligence and professional competence.
That's the worst feeling.
If you've ever felt that disconnect, you are in the perfect place to start dismantling it today.
So let's unpack this core problem and go right back to that agonizing moment at the desk. The screen has stopped. Now, what I've noticed working with learners is that when the panic sets in, the brain immediately reaches for the most extreme, definitive vocabulary word it knows.
Which is usually what?
They reach for the word broken. They will call IT and declare, my computer is broken.
Oh.
Or if they're trying to compensate and sound hyper-professional, they might reach for something overly formal, like, my device has ceased functioning.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But when we analyze the transcripts of how native speakers handle this exact scenario, we rarely see those phrases. Instead, we see a completely different, almost biological vocabulary chunk. We see the word freeze, and its past tense, froze.
And the distinction native speakers make here, which is often entirely subconscious, is absolutely crucial for fluency.
How so?
Well, when an English speaker hears the word broken, their brain instinctively conjures images of irreversible physical damage.
Right.
If you tell an IT technician your laptop is broken, the image forming in their mind is a screen shattered into a spiderweb of glass. Or maybe a cup of hot coffee poured directly into the motherboard. Or a machine that has literally been dropped down a flight of concrete stairs.
Right. Broken implies structural destruction. The integrity of the object is compromised. But froze captures exactly what is happening internally on a software level.
Exactly.
The physical machine is perfectly fine. The hardware is pristine. I always like to think about a frozen computer through the lens of a biological response. It's like a deer caught in the headlights of a speeding car.
That's a great visual.
The deer isn't dead. It isn't broken. But it is completely paralyzed by a sudden, massive overload of sensory information.
Yeah.
It's just stuck there staring, unable to move its legs.
That is a highly accurate mechanical analogy, actually. If a computer froze, what essentially happened is that the applications or the operating system entered a state where they simply stopped processing new inputs.
Just totally locked up.
Yeah, because the central processing unit, the CPU, got caught in a loop or became completely overwhelmed by conflicting commands. You can click the mouse 100 times, but the computer can't acknowledge those clicks because it's entirely consumed by its internal gridlock.
It's so frustrating.
The machine is physically intact, but operationally paralyzed. Now, contrast, my computer froze with the textbook alternative you mentioned.
Yeah.
My device has ceased functioning.
Yeah, my device has ceased functioning sounds like a line delivered by an android in a science fiction movie.
Exactly. It is technically accurate, yes. But language isn't just about technical accuracy, right? It's about social connection.
Absolutely.
When you say, my device has ceased functioning, you create a massive psychological distance between yourself and the person you're speaking to. It's cold, it's clinical. But my computer froze is immediate. It's highly relatable.
Highly. It triggers instant empathy because the person on the other end of the line has experienced that exact same paralysis.
They know the pain. But, knowing the word froze is only half the battle. The other half is the physical mechanics of speaking it. Because if you just insert the word froze into a staccato, broken sentence, you still sound hesitant.
Yes, the delivery matters.
Let's pull a line from one of the office transcripts we analyzed. A colleague is explaining a delay to someone and says, "The files are not ready yet because my computer froze last night." If you listen closely to a native speaker delivering this, they do not pronounce the words in isolation.
Right. It's not my computer froze last night.
No. The rhythm of fluent English is fundamentally built on compression and assimilation. The consonants and vowels blend into one another to conserve breath and vocal energy.
Exactly. It flows into one continuous stream of sound. Let's look at the mechanics of that. The end of computer flows straight into the F of froze. And last night often loses the hard T on last, so it sounds more like last night. The mechanical friction is just removed.
It smooths everything out.
So if you are listening to this right now, I don't want you to just conceptually understand it. Think about the fluidity. My computer froze last night. Try saying that to yourself, focusing not on the individual words, but on never letting your vocal cords stop vibrating. You'll feel what fluency actually physically feels like.
And if we connect this specific phonetic practice to the broader strategic picture of building your vocabulary, what makes freeze such a high-valued chunk is its incredible versatility.
It's not just for computers, right?
Not at all. You aren't just learning a word for your desktop PC. This concept applies universally across almost the entire spectrum of modern smart devices. You can tell your friend, my phone keeps freezing when I open the camera.
Oh, my phone does that all the time.
Right. Or you can complain to your partner, the television froze right in the middle of the penalty shootout. By mastering the conceptual and phonetic delivery of this one specific chunk, you have instantly expanded your usable everyday vocabulary across dozens of highly frustrating real-world scenarios.
Okay, that definitely handles the deer in the headlights paralysis.
Yeah.
But I want to push back a little here, or, well, rather explore the gray area. What do you do when the machine isn't entirely frozen, but it's also clearly not functioning properly?
Ah, the weird behavior zone.
Yeah. It's not paralyzed, but it's doing bizarre, unpredictable things, like the screen flickers green for a second, or an application opens, closes, and reopens completely on its own.
Or the internal fan suddenly revs up to maximum speed and sounds like a jet engine preparing for takeoff.
Yes, my laptop sounds like an airplane sometimes. It's not frozen, it's not broken. So what is it?
This brings us to a crucial pivot in our language strategy. And honestly, it's one of the most common traps for English learners. When a machine is misbehaving in a complex or unpredictable way, learners often tie their brains into absolute knots trying to describe the exact technical symptom.
I really do.
They try to find the English vocabulary for a failing graphics card or a corrupted registry file or a thermal throttling issue. And because they lack that hyper-specialized vocabulary, the conversation completely breaks down.
I see this all the time. Imagine I walk up to my IT director and say, "Excuse me, David. My computer monitor is rendering pixels incorrectly, and the internal cooling mechanism is producing a high decibel acoustic output."
David is going to look at you like you have lost your mind.
He'd probably just cut me off and say, "Oh, your laptop is acting up."
Precisely. Acting up. It is one of the most powerful, elegant phrasal verbs in the English language for dealing with chaos.
But let me challenge that phrase for a second. Acting up sounds incredibly informal. Like if I hear that a child is acting up in a grocery store, it implies they are throwing a tantrum.
Right?
If I use this phrase with a CEO or an IT director, aren't they going to think I'm treating a $10,000 piece of corporate equipment like a mischievous toddler?
Yeah.
Is it really appropriate for a professional environment?
That is a highly valid concern, but this is where we have to understand the culture of English communication. Yes, acting up historically originates from describing misbehaving children or even restless, uncooperative horses in agricultural settings. It implies defiance.
Defiance, right.
But in a modern corporate or tech environment, using acting up is not viewed as juvenile. In fact, it is viewed as highly efficient. It completely saves the speaker and the listener from needing a degree in computer science to initiate a support request.
So it's like a linguistic shortcut.
Exactly. By saying the server is acting up, you are communicating a highly specific social and operational message. You're saying, this machine is performing inconsistently, it is hindering my productivity, and I do not have the technical expertise to diagnose the root cause. It establishes the problem without faking technical knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense. You're admitting a lack of diagnostic knowledge, but you're doing it with total linguistic confidence. You skip the technical jargon and go straight to the human experience of frustration.
Exactly. And the personification of the machine, treating it like a stubborn toddler throwing a tantrum, is a hallmark of natural, fluent English. We humanize our technology because we interact with it all day long as if it were a partner. We give it commands, we expect responses.
And when it defies us,
our brains categorize that defiance almost as a social betrayal.
it really is a betrayal. When the printer refuses to print the document 5 minutes before the big presentation, the printer isn't just failing mechanically, it is actively sabotaging me. That's how it feels emotionally.
And acting up captures that exact emotional reality. Furthermore, to address your concern about versatility, this phrase extends far beyond office electronics. It is a universal diagnostic tool for anything mechanical or systemic that is behaving erratically.
Like what else?
Well, if you read through consumer complaints, you see this constantly. My car's transmission is acting up in cold weather, or the office heating system is acting up again. Even biologically, people say, my bad knee is acting up because of the rain.
Oh, that is a brilliant point. The bad knee is acting up. It's unpredictable, annoying, and totally out of your control. So for the listener, the immediate takeaway here is massive stress reduction.
Absolutely.
When your tech fails in a weird way, you are officially released from the burden of finding the perfect technical diagnostic term. Your computer froze, or your network connection is acting up. Boom! You have communicated the reality of the situation perfectly, naturally, and confidently.
But of course, identifying the problem is only the first step. Once you have established that the machine is acting up or frozen, you are inevitably going to need to involve another human being.
Oh, right, the human element.
You need to pull an IT technician away from their desk, or you need to ask that one colleague who is just naturally gifted with cables to come save you.
Which ushers us into a territory that is an absolute minefield for language learners. The delicate social dynamics of asking for a favor in a second language.
It's tricky.
How do you ask someone to stop what they are doing and fix your problem without sounding like a demanding, entitled boss? Because if I just walk up to my colleague's cubicle and announce, my computer is acting up, come fix it, I've communicated the problem, but I've also just deeply offended them.
You have. You've issued a direct command which violates the unspoken social contract of the workplace. And this is where the transcripts we analyzed reveal a fascinating linguistic strategy.
What do they do?
Native speakers almost universally deploy a specific phrase to soften the demand. They ask, "Can you come take a look at my TC?"
Take a look. Let's analyze the mechanics of why that is so effective. Because on the surface, wait, isn't take a look a bit deceitful?
Deceitful how?
Well, I know it's completely unusable. I don't just want them to stand there and literally look at it with their eyeballs. I desperately want them to physically fix it. Am I manipulating them with polite fiction?
It is absolutely a polite fiction, but it's a necessary one that lubricates social interaction. Let's break down the psychology of the request.
Okay.
If you say, "Can you fix my computer?" you are instantly assigning a heavy burden. You're demanding a specific outcome, a working computer, before the other person even knows what the problem is. That creates immense psychological friction and defensiveness.
Right. They might be thinking, what if I can't fix it?
Exactly. But if you say, "Can you come take a look at my PC?" you are dramatically lowering the stakes. You are framing the request as collaborative observation rather than a demand for labor.
You're inviting them to a mystery rather than assigning them a chore.
Precisely. It implies respect for their expertise. I value your eyes on this problem. It gives them an out. They can look at it, stroke their chin, and say, "Wow, yeah, that's completely broken. You need to call actual IT."
Yeah, you haven't trapped them.
Right. You haven't trapped them into a commitment. It is a brilliant, low-pressure invitation that almost always results in them voluntarily fixing the problem once they are engaged.
So take a look removes the psychological friction from the social dynamic. But we have to address the phonetic friction. Because if a learner pronounces this with heavy textbook articulation, it ruins the casual nature of the request.
It really does.
If you walk up to someone, stand rigidly, and enunciate, "Can you please take a look at my computer?" the psychological ease is destroyed by the mechanical stiffness of the delivery.
It sounds robotic and tense, which entirely defeats the purpose of using a casual idiom.
Exactly. When native speakers say, "take a look at," they do not respect the boundaries of those four distinct words. Through phonetic compression, it essentially transforms into a single, multi-syllable word. Take a look at becomes takulukat.
Takulukat?
The K in slides into the A, the K in look slides into at. Takulukat.
It's a perfect example of consonant-vowel linking. The mouth is essentially finding the path of least physical resistance.
If you're listening, try whispering that to yourself. Takulukat. Notice how your tongue glides. Now, put it in a sentence. Did you takulukat this report?
It's so smooth.
When you master that compression, you don't just sound more fluent, you actually sound more relaxed, which subconsciously tells your colleague that this isn't a massive emergency and they shouldn't be stressed out by your request. It's fascinating how pronunciation affects psychology.
It is deeply interconnected. Now, let's move the scenario forward. You have gracefully, casually asked your colleague to take a look. They agree to help. But how they articulate their agreement introduces a structural quirk of the English language that frequently baffles learners.
Oh, what is it?
I call it the geography of help. In one of the office dialogues we reviewed, a colleague responds to a plea for help over the phone by saying, "Just a minute, I'll be right up."
Okay, I have to stop right there and voice the frustration of millions of English learners. Why up?
It's confusing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If someone is promising to come quickly to my location and assist me, why wouldn't they use a directional word that actually means my location? Why don't they say, "I'll be right there"? Or even just, "I am coming." Where exactly is up in relation to a broken computer?
This is where we have to dive into cognitive linguistics and look at how different languages map physical reality. English is profoundly obsessed with spatial prepositions.
Obsessed is the right word.
Unlike many Romance languages that rely on specific verbs to denote direction, like ascending or descending, English relies on highly versatile prepositions attached to simple verbs to instantly communicate a three-dimensional map of the environment.
Wow.
We don't just communicate time, that we are coming immediately. We subconsciously communicate our exact physical location relative to the person asking for help.
So we are constantly broadcasting our GPS coordinates through our grammar, Let's break down the rules of this spatial mapping based on the office transcripts.
Let's do it. If the colleague on the phone says, "I'll be right up," they are communicating a highly specific geographical reality. They are currently located on a lower floor of the building, and they must physically travel upstairs to reach your location.
Okay, that makes sense.
Conversely, if the IT department is located on the 5th floor and you are on the ground floor, they will inherently say, "I'll be right down." The vertical axis is prioritized in the language.
Okay, the vertical axis makes logical sense once you realize it's about floors in a building.
Right.
But what if we remove the vertical axis? What if we are on the exact same floor? We're just sitting in different cubicles or maybe different offices across a long hallway. They can't say up or down.
Right. In that horizontal scenario, the English spatial map shifts to the prepositions there or over. If it's a general undefined distance, you will hear, "I'll be right there."
And what about over?
If there is a distinct horizontal space to cross, like navigating a maze of desks or walking from one department to another, native speakers will naturally default to, "I'll be right over." The word over implies traversing a specific terrain to reach a destination.
Up, down, there, over. It's like navigating an invisible grid. But there is one more spatial preposition combination that I found in the transcripts that is incredibly specific and honestly profoundly relatable.
Which one?
What if the person offering help is not just on a different floor or across a room, but they are behind a closed door? What if they're in a meeting room, or more commonly at home, behind a bathroom door?
Yes. In the scenario of an enclosed space, the spatial map demands the preposition out. The phrase shifts to, "I'll be right out." You are verbally indicating the act of exiting an enclosure to meet the person in the open space.
There's a moment in one of the everyday conversation recordings we studied that I think perfectly grounds this linguistic rule in visceral human reality.
The bathroom story.
Yes. The speaker was recounting a story from their childhood. They grew up in a house with two older sisters, all sharing a single tiny bathroom. They described the chaotic morning routine, needing to get to school, banging frantically on the wooden bathroom door, and hearing the muffled, agitated voice of their sisters shouting from inside, "Just a minute, I'll be right out."
So classic.
It is such a vivid, universally understood scenario. You can almost feel the wood of the door under your knuckles and hear the echo in the hallway.
That is a phenomenal example of how memory encodes language. The reason we struggle to remember abstract grammar rules written on a whiteboard is that the human brain did not evolve to memorize abstract syntax.
Right. It evolved for survival.
It evolved to remember narratives, emotions, and physical spaces. By attaching the phrase, "I'll be right out," to the highly emotionally charged memory of fighting for a bathroom with a sibling, you engage a completely different part of the brain. You aren't just memorizing a preposition, you are encoding a deeply human experience.
That makes it stick.
Exactly. The next time a learner is stuck in a room and someone knocks, their brain won't search for a grammar chart. It will pull up that feeling, and the phrase, "I'll be right out," will emerge naturally.
I love that. Tie the vocabulary to the human drama. All right, let's bring the drama back to our frozen computer. The narrative progresses. You ask them to take a look. They said they would be right over.
And here they are.
The tech has now arrived at your desk. They've tapped a few keys, run a diagnostic scan, and they've been staring at a progress bar for 5 agonizing minutes, making concerning noises.
Always terrifying.
Always. Now, the scan is finished. They turn to you, and they need to deliver the verdict. And this moment introduces a phrase that I argue is one of the most powerful narrative tools in spoken English. It is the phrase, "It turns out that."
It turns out that if we analyze discourse markers, which are the words we use to manage the flow of conversation, this specific chunk is a masterpiece of tension and release.
How so?
Native English speakers utilize this phrase almost exclusively to reveal a surprise, to communicate the final result of an investigation, or to solve a mystery that both parties have been pondering.
It is the verbal equivalent of a drum roll, or a magician pulling away a velvet curtain.
It acts as a cognitive pivot point. When you begin a sentence with the words, "It turns out that," the listener's brain actually undergoes a micro shift in attention.
They tune in?
They instinctively lean in. Because the phrase signals, "The period of uncertainty is over. I am about to replace our shared ignorance with the definitive truth." It sets the stage for a revelation.
Let's look at how this mechanism functions outside of just tech support, because it is universally applicable. In one of the transcripts, there's a snippet of mundane office gossip. Someone says, "We were all wondering why Frank didn't show up for the massive client presentation today, and it turns out that he was in the hospital with food poisoning."
Poor Frank. But notice how the premise is established. Frank is missing, which is a mystery. The phrase, "it turns out that," acts as the pivot, suspending the listener for a fraction of a second, and then the resolution is delivered. The mystery is solved.
It even works for comedic timing. There was another interaction where a coworker says with a very serious face, "I've been feeling so exhausted and nauseous every morning recently. Well, I went to the doctor and it turns out that I'm pregnant."
Oh, wow.
And then they let a heavy pause hang in the air before bursting into laughter and saying, "Just kidding, I just need more sleep."
That's a great example. The joke only functions because the phrase, "it turns out that," forcefully sets up the expectation of a massive, life-altering revelation. It manipulates the listener's anticipation.
So how do we physically deliver this drum roll? Because just like take a look at if you chop it into separate pieces, you destroy the magic. If you say, "it turns out that," there is no suspense. There is only boredom.
The phonetic execution here requires complete blending. The T in it is almost entirely swallowed, and the S at the end of turns forcefully links directly into the O of out.
It creates a Z sound, right?
Yes. It's not a turns out, it is turns out. The entire phrase solidifies into a single unbreakable block of sound. I turns out that.
It turns out that. If you're practicing this, try to say it fast enough that your jaw barely moves. It turns out that. Once you encode that specific block of sound into your procedural memory, which is the part of the brain responsible for motor skills like riding a bike, you can attach literally any conclusion to the end of it, and you will instantly command the room's attention like a native storyteller.
Returning to our tech diagnostic scenario, the technician turns to you, utilizes that exact narrative pivot, and delivers the bad news. I ran a full system scan, and it turns out that you have a massive amount of infected files.
And there is the dreadful reveal: infected files. Now, I want to pause the narrative here because we need to examine a massive underlying cognitive framework that English uses for technology.
It's quite bizarre when you think about it.
It is. We are discussing a machine. It is an inanimate object constructed of plastic, silicon, copper wiring, and rare earth metals. Yet we are utilizing words like sick, virus, and infected. We are talking about it as if it were an organism. Why on earth did the tech industry decide to map the language of human biology onto abstract computer code?
This is one of the most fascinating intersections of linguistics and computer science history. When the pioneers of early computing, people like John von Neumann in the late 1940s, were first theorizing about self-replicating lines of code, the concepts were entirely abstract.
Right, it's just math.
Exactly. You cannot see code. You cannot physically watch malicious software altering binary data on a magnetic hard drive. To the general public in the ensuing decades, especially as personal computers entered homes, these invisible threats were terrifying and completely incomprehensible. How does a machine just break from the inside without being touched?
So they needed a metaphor that the average person already deeply understood.
Exactly. And what is the most universally understood mechanism of invisible internal destruction? A biological virus. Everyone understands how a common cold works. An invisible entity enters the host body. It covertly hijacks the host's internal mechanisms to multiply itself. It causes varying degrees of harm or operational failure, and it highly prioritizes spreading itself to other nearby hosts.
It's an exact match.
The biological metaphor perfectly mapped onto the behavior of these new malicious programs. In fact, one of the earliest recognized computer viruses in the 1970s was called the Creeper system.
Wait, Creeper.
Yes, Creeper. And it literally moved through early networks, replicating itself. The term virus was formally adopted in academia by the mid-1980s because it was the only way to explain this invisible threat to a terrified public.
It is brilliant public relations, honestly. It takes something incomprehensibly complex and makes it viscerally familiar. Let's clearly define the specific biological culprits that show up in the modern tech support vocabulary.
Based on the diagnostic language, a virus, in technological terms, is the actual malicious program, the deliberate code designed to disrupt, steal, or harm your operating system.
And what about infected files?
An infected file is the carrier. It is an otherwise normal, innocent file, like a PDF of a financial report or a JPEG image that has been compromised and is currently harboring the virus code inside it, much like a mosquito carrying malaria.
Okay, and a corrupt file.
A corrupt file is one that has been so severely damaged, either by the action of the virus or by a separate system crash, that its fundamental structure is broken. It can no longer be opened or read by the computer at all. It is essentially dead tissue.
Dead tissue is a grim but accurate way to look at a corrupt file. But what I find most interesting here isn't just the nouns, the virus, the infection. It's the verbs we use to describe acquiring them.
The verbs are very revealing.
If a learner uses a direct translation app, they might try to explain the disaster by saying, "My computer acquired a virus," or perhaps, "My laptop contracted a malicious program."
Both of those options are grammatically flawless, yet they sound incredibly unnatural in a spoken context. They are overly clinical.
Right. But look at the chunk pulled directly from the natural transcripts. "I have no idea how my computer picked up a virus." Picked up.
Picked up. It completely changes the tone of the event.
I want to push back on this, though. We are talking about a potentially disastrous breach of corporate security that could cost a company millions of dollars. Isn't saying, "My computer picked up a bug," a little too casual?
Too casual.
Yeah, it sounds like I dropped a piece of candy on the sidewalk and ate it anyway. Shouldn't I be more formal and serious when explaining this to the IT department?
That is a very logical assumption, but it ignores the psychological self-defense mechanisms built into casual language. Yes, it is a serious corporate issue, but from the perspective of the employee, they are in trouble.
Oh, I see.
If you use highly formal language like, "I acquired a virus," it subconsciously implies a level of active participation or deliberate action. It sounds like you went out and bought it. By utilizing the phrasal verb "picked up," you are strategically deploying casual language to deflect personal responsibility.
Oh, wow. It's an evasion tactic.
It is entirely an evasion tactic.
Yeah.
Pick up is the exact same verb we use when discussing a minor biological illness. You say, "I think I picked up a cold on the subway." It firmly implies that the infection was entirely accidental, unintentional, and simply a matter of terrible luck, being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
You're just an innocent bystander.
You are casting yourself as the victim of circumstance, not the perpetrator of a security breach. So for learners, adopting "picked up a virus" doesn't just make you sound more like a native speaker, it actually subtly protects you in a high-stress workplace scenario. It shifts your English from textbook rigidity to street-level, socially aware fluency.
That is a phenomenal insight. You are managing the PR of your own mistake through vocabulary choice. But of course, the IT technician is rarely fooled by this PR.
No, they know exactly what happened.
Yeah, they know why the machine picked up the virus.
Yeah?
And in our scenario, the tech delivers the root cause of the infection. The system's antivirus software wasn't up to date.
Ah, up to date. If there is one phrase that completely dominates modern corporate culture, project management, and technology, it is this one.
It is everywhere. Let's deconstruct the why and the what of this specific chunk because it carries a lot of weight.
At its conceptual core, up to date means possessing the absolute most recent, current information, software iteration, or modifications available at this exact moment in time.
So in our tech scenario,
In the context of our infected computer, the explanation is simple. If an antivirus program is not up to date, it means it does not possess the newest definitions required to recognize the most recently coded viruses on the internet. It is essentially an army trying to fight a modern cyber war using outdated, obsolete intelligence from last year. It is blind to new threats.
and the anxiety of obsolescence is very real in the workplace. What makes this phrase so critical to master is its incredible grammatical flexibility.
It goes both ways.
Exactly. It can be weaponized negatively to explain the fundamental cause of a failure, or it can be utilized positively to declare a state of perfect readiness and competence. Let's run through some rapid-fire examples from the data to demonstrate this flexibility in real-world environments.
I will provide the analytical context. You provide the application.
Perfect. Let's start with a negative application. You need to justify a budget request to your manager for a hardware upgrade because your current machine is obsolete.
You would state, I am requesting a new laptop because my current hardware simply isn't up to date. You are blaming the equipment's age for your lack of productivity.
Right. Next scenario. You are in a high-stakes strategy meeting. Someone hands you a printed sales report, but you notice the data is from the third quarter of 2022. It is useless for making decisions today.
You hold it up and say, we cannot base our projections on this. The information in this report isn't up to date. It immediately flags the data as a liability.
Now let's pivot to the positive usage, which is where you really build professional credibility.
Yeah.
You have worked all weekend on a massive financial spreadsheet. You are handing the final, flawless version to the executive team.
You confidently slide it across the table and announce, I have finalized the review and all the financial data is completely up to date. You are guaranteeing accuracy.
Final scenario. You are in a rental car in a foreign city. The roads are a mess of construction.
Yeah.
And you want to verify that your partner's navigation app knows about the road closures.
You ask, are you sure the routing on this map is up to date?
I want to explicitly highlight a massive confidence-building strategy for the listeners here. Integrating the phrase up to date into your professional vocabulary instantly elevates your perceived fluency and competence.
It really does.
When you use it, you are broadcasting to the room that you are a professional who deeply values accuracy, currency, and attention to detail. If your manager asks you for the status of a delayed project, do not say, "I have the newest information." That sounds like a beginner. Instead, say, "Let me pull the most up-to-date numbers for you." It sounds sharp, authoritative, and totally native.
It is a high-value linguistic asset. Now, let us return to the unfolding drama of our unfortunate computer user who has just been informed that their negligence regarding updates caused a massive viral infection.
Uh-oh.
Human nature dictates that their immediate response is defensive denial. The user in the transcript instinctively protests. But I don't understand. I'm always extremely careful when I'm browsing the internet.
Ugh, the classic plea of innocence. It wasn't me, I only clicked safe links. But setting aside the lie, let's examine the specific verb they chose. Browsing. Because in the evolution of internet terminology, there is a fascinating, nuanced distinction between the verbs browse and surf.
It's a real generational shift.
Yes. When I first started logging onto the internet in the late 1990s using dial-up modems that sounded like screeching robots, literally everyone referred to it as surfing the net. You never hear that anymore. Why the shift?
This traces a beautiful arc of how language adapts to technological evolution. The phrase surfing the internet was actually coined in 1992 by a librarian named Jean Armour Pauly.
A librarian coined that.
Yes. At the time, the early internet was chaotic, unstructured, and lacked powerful search engines. She chose the metaphor of surfing because she wanted a term that conveyed a sense of fun, a hint of danger, and the feeling of navigating an unpredictable, powerful force like a surfer riding ocean waves. You didn't know exactly where a hyperlink would take you. You were just riding the wave of data from one random page to the next.
It was passive exploration. You were at the mercy of the current.
Exactly. Surfing implies a wandering, directionless journey. But as the internet matured, with the rise of sophisticated search engines, indexed databases, and structured e-commerce, our relationship to the network changed. We stopped wandering aimlessly. We became goal-oriented.
And that's where browse comes in.
And that is where the verb browse took over. Etymologically, browse comes from animal husbandry. It originally described goats or deer selectively eating leaves and shoots from specific trees. It implies selective, intentional consumption.
Wow, goats and deer.
Today, when you are browsing the internet, it implies you are utilizing a web browser as a tool to look for specific information, shop for a specific item, or read specific news.
It's the difference between floating in the ocean and walking through a highly organized library. That is a fantastic distinction. Let's apply this to a practical sentence upgrade for our listeners.
Let's do it.
Imagine an English learner wants to self-deprecatingly confess to their friend that they wasted their entire Friday afternoon at the office doing absolutely nothing productive. A beginner might construct a clunky literal sentence like, "I look at internet all day and do no work." It conveys the basic facts, but it lacks rhythm and natural phrasing. How do we upgrade this?
By applying our targeted chunk, the fluent, upgraded version becomes, "I didn't get anything done at work today. I was just browsing the internet all afternoon."
I was browsing the internet all afternoon. It flows beautifully. But we must provide a critical mechanical pronunciation reminder here because a tiny phonetic error can ruin the clarity of this word.
The S sound.
Yes, the word is spelled B-R-O-W-S-E, but the S at the end is a trap. It is not pronounced with a soft, hissing S sound. If you say browse with a soft S, it can sound phonetically similar to other words, or just generally muddy your pronunciation. To say it correctly, you must activate your vocal cords and produce a hard, buzzing Z sound at the end. Browse.
That physical vibration in the throat is the key indicator of accuracy.
Try it right now. Put your fingers on your throat and say, browse. No vibration. Now say, browse. You should feel the buzz against your fingers. I was browsing the internet. Mastering that vibration ensures you are understood instantly without the listener having to mentally autocorrect your pronunciation.
Speaking of physical reactions and vibrations, we have reached the emotional climax of dealing with broken technology. Because hidden within the transcripts we analyzed is perhaps the most practical, deeply human, and darkly hilarious piece of advice delivered by an exasperated IT technician to a user.
Oh, I know exactly the line you're referring to. The user is panicking, the computer is locked up, and the technician, in a completely deadpan, exhausted voice, simply says, "Just Try not to kick or hit the computer.
It is a beautifully absurd moment because it highlights the fundamental irrationality of human anger.
We really are irrational.
Despite our complete logical understanding that striking a plastic and metal chassis will do absolutely nothing to repair the microscopic corrupted binary code on the hard drive, our primal evolutionary reaction to a frozen screen is a deeply felt urge to inflict physical violence upon it.
Oh, I will absolutely confess to this. When my computer freezes literally 1 millisecond before I hit save on a document I've been working on for 3 hours, my vision goes red. I want to punch the monitor. I want to pick the laptop up and throw it out a closed window. Why do we do this? Why do we get furious at rocks with electricity in them?
It is a byproduct of human evolution and anthropomorphism. Our brains evolved over millions of years to interact with environments filled with other intentional agents, animals, and humans. If a rock is sitting on the ground and doesn't move, you don't get angry at the rock. It's just a rock. But technology mimics intention. It responds to commands, it performs tasks. So when it suddenly disobeys or ceases to function, our primal brain miscategorizes the machine. It stops seeing a tool and starts seeing a social agent that is being deliberately defiant. It feels like insubordination.
So we get angry because we feel like the machine is disrespecting us. I think there is a profound, almost poetic parallel here for language learners. The agonizing frustration of dealing with a frozen computer perfectly mirrors the internal frustration of encountering a language block mid-sentence.
That is a remarkable connection. Let's unpack the cognitive architecture of both experiences. What is actually happening in the brain?
It feels very similar.
In both the computer failure and the language block, your intention is crystal clear. You know exactly what you want to achieve. The goal is defined. But the mechanism required for execution, whether it is the computer's CPU processing a command or your brain's language center trying to recall specific vocabulary, suddenly and completely stalls. You are trapped in the agonizing gap between having an intention and being able to execute it.
Yes, you possess the thought, but the tool, either the software or your second language, refuses to cooperate, and the frustration bubbles up instantly. When the computer freezes, you want to hit the machine. When your English freezes, you want to hit your own forehead. It is a profound feeling of betrayal by the very system you rely on to navigate the world.
And that feeling of betrayal is exponentially magnified when the system acts unpredictably without your input. Which brings us to another universally infuriating symptom mentioned in the tech transcripts. It shuts down by itself?
It shuts down by itself. I want the listener to really internalize the phrasing of that symptom. A beginner English learner, trying to translate their thoughts literally, might construct a sentence like, "The computer turns off automatically without my permission."
Which, again, communicates the basic fact, but it sounds incredibly unnatural. It sounds like a legal contract.
It does.
It lacks the nuance of the native phrasing. By utilizing the phrase by itself, the speaker is assigning a kind of spooky, independent autonomy to the machine. It emphasizes that the machine has completely gone rogue. It is making decisions independent of the user's commands.
It shuts down by itself. That's almost creepy. Now, this brings us to the most critical juncture of our entire deep dive. We have spent an hour dissecting the history of irises, the cognitive linguistics of spatial prepositions, the phonetic blending of it turns out that, and the psychology of our anger towards machines.
It's been a lot of information.
But understanding all of these concepts conceptually, nodding your head as you listen to us explain the etymology of browse, that is all passive learning. It is valuable, but it is entirely passive. And passive understanding will absolutely not stop you from freezing up when the moment of crisis actually arises and you need to speak. To bridge that gap, you must physically train the muscles in your mouth and jaw.
You have to move from declarative memory, knowing a fact about language, to procedural memory, the physical, unconscious ability to articulate the sounds, and that requires action.
It's actionable advice time. At the beginning of this deep dive, we promised you a comprehensive 7-day speaking challenge. This protocol is designed to force neuroplasticity. It is a structured roadmap for turning the passive knowledge you've gained today into active, unshakable fluency.
And the best part is, you do not need to hire a tutor or find a conversation partner for the vast majority of this. You simply need 15 minutes a day and a willingness to feel a little uncomfortable.
Let's break down the daily methodology step by step. Day 1 is deliberately low impact. Your only task is to listen to this specific deep dive again, but purely for overall meaning. Do not take notes. Do not stress about memorizing definitions. Just let the rhythm, the intonation, and the flow of the English wash over your brain. You're simply acclimatizing your ear to the concepts.
Then we escalate to day 2. You replay the audio, but this time you are actively hunting. You sit down with a notebook and you write down exactly 8 useful chunks. Do not write full complex sentences or grammar rules. Just write the chunks. Write down acting up. Write down take a look. Write down it turns out that, and up to date, you're essentially curating your own highly personalized emergency toolkit.
In 3 is where the physical neurological training truly begins. This is the shadowing phase. You play short segments of our voices, and you speak out loud simultaneously, attempting to match our rhythm, our stress points, and our phonetic linking exactly.
Remember that single block of sound we discussed? It turns out that.
Right, you practice articulating that specific cluster of syllables repeatedly until your jaw and tongue can execute the movement automatically without your conscious brain having to spell out the letters. You are building muscle memory in the motor cortex.
Day 4 is the crucible. This is the courage test. Your assignment is to stand in an empty room and talk out loud about a specific time. Your own technology failed you miserably. Maybe your phone battery died while you were navigating a foreign city, or your laptop completely crashed in the middle of a Zoom presentation. You are going to recount that story out loud for 2 uninterrupted minutes.
And here is the unbreakable rule. No notes are allowed. You cannot read from a script. You just speak. Now, I will warn you right now, it will be messy. You will stutter, you will pause, you will use the wrong tense. That is exactly the point of the exercise. You are forcing your brain to operate under the cognitive strain of spontaneous generation.
Which transitions perfectly into the analytical phase of day 5. You repeat the exact same exercise from day 4, telling the tech failure story, but this time you press record on your smartphone's voice memo app. When you're finished, you do the hardest thing for any language learner. You listen back to your own voice.
It's so painful, but so necessary.
You are not listening to judge your accent or punish yourself. You are listening with surgical precision to identify your hesitation points. Where exactly did the story stall? Where did you pause, reach for a complex vocabulary word, and grab empty air? That specific point of friction is exactly where you need to insert one of the natural chunks you curated on day 2. If you hesitated trying to explain a failing battery, that is where you insert "my phone was acting up."
Day 6 is all about refinement and simplification. You are going to retell that exact same story for a 3rd time, but your goal is to use significantly simpler English. Stop trying to impress an imaginary grammar teacher. Stop trying to use the past, perfect, continuous conditional tense. Focus entirely on unbroken flow.
Flow is everything.
If you only use basic structures like "my computer froze, it was acting up, I lost all my files, I asked a guy to take a look," but you deliver them without stopping, you will sound infinitely more fluent than someone who stumbles through a highly complex, grammatically perfect sentence. Flow beats complexity every single time.
Finally, we arrive at day 7, integration. You hold a mini conversation. If you are fortunate enough to have an English-speaking friend, a colleague, or a tutor, use these new chunks in a conversation with them. But if you do not have anyone available, have the conversation with yourself. Truly, play both roles.
I love this strategy.
Sit in one chair and be the frustrated, panicking user whose machine is acting up. Then move to another chair and be the calm, collected IT technician explaining that it turns out they picked up a virus. I know it sounds ridiculous, but from a neurological standpoint, your brain's language center does not know the difference between talking to a person and talking to a wall. It only knows that the motor cortex is firing, the mouth is moving, and the English words are successfully entering the physical environment.
I really truly want to emphasize that final point to our listeners, because it is the biggest mental roadblock to fluency. Speaking alone in an empty room is completely 100% valid practice. You do not need a native speaker sitting across from you to validate your efforts.
No, you don't.
You do not need to wait until your grammar is flawless to begin making noise. You simply need to start moving the muscles in your face and making the sounds. People think they need to feel confident before they speak. That is completely backward. The confidence is not the prerequisite. The confidence is the result of the speaking. The action creates the feeling.
That is a profound truth, not just for language acquisition, but for mastering any complex skill. Let us summarize the extensive journey we have navigated today. We started by examining the terrifying moment of a paralyzed, frozen screen, and why that term is so much more effective than calling it broken.
We explored the gray area of a machine that isn't dead, but is just acting up and misbehaving, and how that phrase acts as a shield against needing deep technical knowledge.
We analyzed the psychological friction of asking for help, and how the casual phrase, take a look, removes that friction entirely.
We mapped the invisible grid of English spatial prepositions, learning why someone on another floor says, "I'll be right up," while someone behind a door says, "I'll be right out."
We mastered the narrative drumroll of, it turns out that blending the sounds together to build suspense, only to discover that our machine had picked up a virus, a phrase that brilliantly deflects personal responsibility because our software wasn't up to date.
We clarified the historical evolution of the internet, defining the crucial difference between aimlessly surfing and intentionally browsing.
And perhaps most importantly, on a psychological level, we have validated the very human primal urge to violently strike a machine when it defies us and shuts down by itself.
It truly has been a full, emotional, historical, and linguistic journey. We covered a lot of ground today.
We certainly did. And as we conclude, I want to leave the listener with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as they navigate their technological lives this week. I want you to actively notice how intensely human our relationship with machines has become and how our language perfectly mirrors that intimacy.
That's so true.
We don't just say a computer has a software error. We use biological terms. We say it gets infected. We don't say it has a mechanical inconsistency. We personify it. We say it acts up like a naughty, defiant child. We say it caught a virus. We experience a visceral desire to punch it when it betrays our trust.
The betrayal is real.
The closer technology gets to the very center of our daily existence, the more our English language treats it not as a cold metal tool, but as a living, breathing, deeply frustrating entity. Pay close attention to how you talk to your screens and devices this week. You might be genuinely surprised by just how much raw human emotion is packed into your everyday technical vocabulary.
Oh, that is such a fantastic point. The smartphone isn't just a tool anymore. It is practically a high-maintenance roommate that demands our constant attention.
Okay.
Well, I want to say a massive thank you for being here with us today and investing your time in this deep dive. Doing the hard, focused work of active learning is never easy, especially when the vocabulary is tied to stressful situations.
It takes effort.
But taking the time to truly understand the history, the psychology, and the mechanics behind these everyday phrases is exactly what propels you out of the frustrating trap of passive listening and into the realm of active, unshakable, confident fluency. Remember the analogy of the frozen CPU. When the panic hits, don't let your English freeze like an overloaded hard drive.
Keep moving.
Take a breath, rely on your procedural memory, and keep the words flowing. If you want more deep dives that deconstruct real native English and build your speaking confidence without relying on boring, outdated textbook lectures, make sure you subscribe to English on Mic and leave a like on this audio. Commit to that 7-day speaking challenge, trust the process, and we will see you next time.